Coming up next on This Week in Computer Hardware, where's Catalyst 14.1? We want BF4 running with Mantle, WD Reds versus Greens, all of Intel's specs, 6 R9 290X GPUs, and you're still waiting on Bitcoins and so much more. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 252, recorded January 30th, 2014. Cheap gaming and the Catalyst 14.1 watch. Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch weekly show that aims to bring you the best, most informative, most useful, most fun, and most valuable computer news, at least on the hardware side of things, each and every week. I am joined, as always, by Mr. Ryan Shrout of beautiful Kentucky. I understand it's cold in Kentucky, unseasonably cold.
It's less, I would say this is probably where we're supposed to be. I think today's high got up to like 28 degrees or something like that. The previous days, I think wind chills were down like in the minus 20, minus 30 range earlier in the week. That was not fun. But it's better now.
It's not quite Georgia cold there then.
Yeah, it's amazing how big, like 25-degree temperature difference feels enormous, right? So you go from 3 to 28, and all of a sudden it's like, man, it's like short sleeves weather out here. Yeah.
We were just reflecting earlier on how chill it seemed here in Petaluma, California. 52 degrees. Might drop to 48 by tonight.
You might hit 48 degrees. Wow, that sucks.
I'm just trying to figure out. I don't know. I was still enjoying your attempt to convey the level of ire Al Roker had for the mayor of Atlanta for not noticing that it was going to freeze over. Hot Atlanta is going to be cold as hell, Atlanta.
It was.
Oh, my goodness.
The idea of sleeping in a Home Depot because you can't get home seems like pretty worst case scenario for snowstorms in the South.
I have been in Atlanta during a cold snap, and it was, like 22 degrees, and pipes were exploding, and cars were running off the road, and people were freezing to death. It
can happen.
It can happen. I've also been in San Francisco hitting 85 degrees, and people are dying of heat prostration. So who knows? Ladies and gentlemen, exciting news this week. AMD Catalyst 14.1 will bring Mantle support to Battlefield 4. We've been talking about this at CES. We've been talking about this last year. We've been talking about Mantle for months. Mantle basically allowing the games to access things, more directly to the GPU. Battlefield 4, the big testing ground. Will it be awesome? Will it suck? Will it be amazing? We talked to some developers about this at CES on Techzilla, which is kind of exciting. And Ryan, you have been living and breathing Mantle for quite some time. Are you excited, or are you kind of, I want to see it actually ship?
So I would say at the beginning of this week, I was excited because I knew that it was coming down the pipeline very, very soon. So this Mantle was originally kind of announced in September, I think it was, when AMD first talked about their Hawaii GPU. And then they said, hey, in December, there's going to be a patch for arguably the most popular, or one of the most popular, multiplayer games in Battlefield 4. So Battlefield 4 and the Frostbite engine were going to support Mantle in December. That got delayed into January as the Battlefield 4 just had general stability issues they wanted to address first, which is fine, makes sense. And so actually the patch for Battlefield 4 to add support for the Mantle renderer was released today on the 30th. Which is great, right? So now if you open up Origin and you right-click on Battlefield 4, you can select Battlefield 4 32-bit or 64-bit or Mantle. And great, you would think, except for that as of this recording, there's still no driver out to enable Mantle support from AMD on the cards yet.
I hate the wah, 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 wah sound more than any other sound in the universe. Yeah. I've chased down audio guys for using it, so I apologize for making it. But why does AMD not have a driver in place?
So the way it was told to me is that they basically found a couple of like show-stopping bugs with it last minute. And so, long story short, like Wednesday or Tuesday, I was expecting to get a driver Tuesday night, and they said, no, we found an issue that has to be fixed. And we said, we'll get it to you Wednesday. And it didn't happen Wednesday. And now we didn't get it. We're not going to get it on Thursday either. We're talking, I might be able to get it on Friday now. And the unfortunate part is it just seems that AMD is rushing at this point, right? So it kind of unfortunately paints AMD in a little bit of a negative light again, because they kind of claimed when the delay from December to January happened that, hey, this is because EA, they don't want to spend the resources kind of finalizing Mantle on their side. They want to make sure that the game is stable and all that, and that's fine. But the insinuation was that, hey, as AMD, we are ready, but our partner is not, so we're going to wait for them. And now their partner has released their portion of it, and AMD doesn't have a driver, which is a huge black eye for them at this point, right? So, because they were talking to us all week about here's how you're going to test it, here's how you're going to see the differences, here's the platforms where we think it will make the most sense, here's some example performance numbers, and I was like, okay, great, this is awesome. Now just give me that driver and we'll do our testing and everything will move forward. And we're never able to get those drivers yet. So they did provide some numbers, and I'll say that the numbers provided by AMD and numbers provided by EA DICE themselves when they kind of launched it, because obviously they've been testing it for a while. The most interesting thing if you want to know one thing about Mantle, you want to understand what it does and why it's an improvement over DirectX or OpenGL, is that it decreases software overhead on the system as a whole. And that will be most apparent in instances where you are CPU bound in your game. So if you have a mid-range to low-end processor, Mantle will mean more for you regardless of the graphics card that you have installed. Obviously, it has to be an AMD Radeon GCN-based part, but it will mean more to you if you have a low to mid-range processor than if you have like a 4770K or Sandy Bridge E or an Ivy Bridge E. For example, the numbers they gave us, if you have a R9 290X, right, their flagship part, but you have an Ivy Bridge E processor, the flagship CPU from Intel, even at 2560 by 1600, you're going to see 9 to 10% performance improvement, right? That's still pretty good,
right?
If that turns out to be the case, because it's free, right? Like you're not paying anything for it. It's an advantage that AMD has over NVIDIA, right? This is not something NVIDIA will be able to claim. However, if you have that same processor with a low-end GPU, like an R7 260X, which is a little bit... hopefully there are very few people in this world that have an Ivy Bridge E $1,000 processor and pair with it an R7 260X GPU, but I'm sure there are some people that do for whatever reason. Now you're talking about 1.4 to 2.7% improvement. Not that great. And then the last one worth mentioning is like if you have a modest processor, say you bought a new Kaveri APU, like they use the A10 7700K, so it's a $140, $150 processor, and you happen to pair that with an R9 290X, the flagship GPU, you're talking about at 1080p as much as 40% improvement in your average frame rate.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, right. Now it's the 40% number. Like if you look at the story on PCPer.com, there are 8 different numbers of percentage of improvements. One of them is 40. The next one down is 17, then 16, then 10, 9, 8, 2, 1. So like the 40 is kind of the outlier, right? So when they claim, with Mantle, you'll be able to get up to 40% better performance, it's true.
Can I make a joke? Just stop the intelligent progress of this conversation for just one moment and say, so if you have an unbalanced CPU-GPU combination and it happens to be the GPU that nobody can buy because they're all going to Bitcoin miners, and you're running this game with the 14.1 Catalyst driver that hasn't been released yet, you should see like a 40% increase. Yeah, that exactly. It's weird, right? And
I think, we've had discussions here at our office about how many people are buying low-end processors to pair with high-end GPUs. And my assumption immediately was like, surely nobody. But if you look around at like the Build a PC subreddit, where people, if you look at some of these builds, they are sacrificing every dollar in every other location, whether it be in case or power supply or processor, in order to invest all that in GPU, right? Not for mining, but for gaming, right? They say this is where all the impact is on the GPU. So there are people that are weighting it that way. I just don't know if they're weighting it that drastically.
I don't think it's funny you should mention that, because we just did a build. One of the guys we work with at Techzilla, we did a build on Trying, a gaming PC build, and he went to the Build a PC subreddit. And it was interesting because they kept him, they rolled Core i5 on the CPU to kind of help maximize the GPU he could get, but they kept it. The Build a PC subreddit's pretty good about keeping things balanced. What we're seeing in that chart over there is ridiculously off balance. I mean, from one extreme kind of down to the other. And that's an interesting kind of theoretical examination. And maybe it's something that AMD's running into based on statistical examination of gaming that they're doing inside of the drivers, which I don't think they're actually doing. But, I was hoping, like, one of the developers we talked with at CES was like, look, we could go from like 8 frames per second with 52,000 crazy objects in our massively multiplayer game to like 40 frames per second. You know what I mean? Like, that was an interesting kind of, by using Mantle, we can do a lot of stuff more efficiently because they have a huge amount of objects, working on the page. But it seems like, one, can they ship it? Two, how much is AMD paying Battlefield? Or paying to have this optimized for Battlefield? Or do you think the Battlefield 4 people are doing this because they want to take advantage of a performance improvement?
So that's an interesting question. I don't really know. My guess is that there's some financial exchange taking place, but it may not be as much as we would expect. The lead developer at DICE, Johan Anderson, was a big proponent of the idea of Mantle, right? He is a big proponent of the idea of a lower level API that gets rid of the overhead that DirectX forces upon developers when they're building games for PCs. And he, in several conversations I've had with him, has been very honestly enthusiastic about the capability that gets unlocked when you have an API like this. What is kind of, so a couple other points I want to make is like, it's what some people are saying that Mantle is actually providing is kind of, hey, AMD's processor performance has been lackluster compared to Intel. So this is actually a way for them to improve the gaming performance of their processors, right? It will improve it, compared to Intel, but it will actually improve it. It's not like that won't work on Intel CPUs, right? So it seems like if you have a low-end processor, you're going to see the most advantage out of Mantle. But if the result of a 4960X Ivy Bridge E with a 290X sees 10% improvement at 2560 by 1600 with all the settings turned up, that's okay. Like that's an interesting first example of what Mantle could possibly do.
Right.
The other interesting thing that has come up about it, and I don't have any numbers for it yet because we don't have the driver, is Crossfire. So a lot of the bottleneck of Crossfire is on the Windows side, on the API side with DirectX and doing things back and forth. So the potential for drastic multi-GPU performance improvement is there with Mantle. The complicated part about it is that with Mantle, multi-GPU support is completely at the discretion of the developer. Like, the developer can't just go, we'll add support in for multi-GPU and kind of the AMD driver will handle most of it. You have to architect your engine to build for it, which is interesting because, say, like right now, multi-GPU is done an alternate frame rendering, where if you have two graphics cards, one graphics card is working on one frame, the other one is working on the next frame, and they kind of alternate back and forth. And that works okay. There's some weird things that crop up with game engines where that's a pain in the butt. Right. So with Mantle, a developer could say, have both GPUs working on the same frame at the same time, right? It's something that what used to be possible a long time ago with SLI, but it was way, way more complicated. And maybe you could have one GPU focusing on certain aspects of it of a single frame, not just like top or bottom, but okay, everything that is within a certain X or Z distance from the player, you'll handle everything within the front half of that Z distance. You can handle GPU and merges it all and goes forth. So like the potential for improvement there is pretty interesting, but I think that's going to take a lot of work, and I don't know how many developers are going to be willing to invest in that. It's incredibly interesting. It's incredibly disappointing that AMD is kind of stepping on their shoestrings here, trying to get this release out, but they're kind of falling over while they're doing it. Right? It's they're saying, hey, all graphics cards are supported, but we still have more optimizations we're going to do for the HD 7000 series and for the 280X and 270X. Things like that make me wonder, why did AMD put this deadline on themselves of December initially if they were never going to be able to kind of get everything ready in time?
Because they wanted to ship it with the game? Because they wanted to ship it in time for the holiday shopping season? Was it going to be the big boost going into Christmas?
Yeah, they just basically wanted it to be a talking point and a point of contention for when people were comparing the 290 and 290X versus NVIDIA's 780 Ti and 780 and all that stuff, right? So, if you look in forums and you look in our comments, you'll see people that debate, well, it's Mantle versus G-Sync. Which feature do you want, right? Like that's the NVIDIA versus AMD debate. If performance is kind of even, that's what you're looking at. Well, so the problem is you can buy G-Sync today only in one monitor. And it's okay. But everybody, all the AMD kind of fans, kind of leaned on Mantle, and that was important for AMD's marketing. And this needs to succeed.
I keep hearing in my head you say, but you can buy G-Sync today, and all of a sudden they're in the back of my mind, oh, because it's true. Yeah. It's a little frustrating. So hopefully by next week we'll have an idea of what Ryan's testing of Mantle and Battlefield 4 looks like in the real world, in actual gaming, in a balanced system. Interesting rumor, like how Scott put it on PC Per, somewhat unexpected and possibly wrong. Maxwell, NVIDIA's new architecture to replace Kepler, said to appear in February in the form of a GeForce GTX 750 Ti. Scott definitely says the rumors sound iffy. Could be a TSMC 28-nanometer fabrication technology, later transitioned to the 20-nanometer lines. Quote, as if the 700 series family tree was not diverse enough, end quote. And I got to agree with that one. How complicated can you make one set of cards? I mean, do you think this is going to... This sounds way, 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 way too early for Maxwell to me.
I agree. The only reason that I could think of that they would do something like this is that Maxwell will be... A new architecture will be complex. I think the main bottleneck here is that we're still on 28-nanometer process tech, and that's been slowing everything down. So if they bring out this part and it happens to be based on Maxwell, it's kind of like a test run. Like this is the most simple implementation we can do on a process technology that we weren't targeting for this architecture, right? So we don't think we can make a full-size 28-nanometer Maxwell part, but we can make this lower cost, smaller die with it, we think pretty reasonably. That would be the only reason I could think that would be the case. I find it odd that it would be a 700 series, like that they wouldn't, I don't know, 750 Ti seems like weird branding for it, because now you're going to have essentially you just have two architectures. No, you'd have GK104 and GK110, but they're technically the same thing. I don't know, but you can't come out with like the 850 Ti, because then everybody automatically is like, well, I'm not buying a 780 because obviously the 880 is right around the corner or something like that. So it would be an odd place to do it, but I don't know. I don't know what to expect. I mean, the rumors say in February, which is last I checked, just a couple of days away.
While we're dumping rumors, videocards.com is suggesting there will be two more NVIDIA cards, the GeForce GTX Titan Black and the GTX 790. The GeForce Titan Black will be full performance, double precision floating points, and a move from 3 gigs to 6 gigabytes of memory. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same as the GTX 780 Ti. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. You know, and $1,000, another $1,000 card. Cannibalizing.
Are you a fan of $30,000 graphics cards?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's funny. It's like, let's cannibalize the incredibly lucrative workstation market with $1,000 version of a consumer card that does the floating point precision we've been trying to wipe out from the consumer card market.
Yeah, it's Titan. Even when Titan was released initially, that was kind of like an odd placement. It was meant as a combination high performance computing card and gaming card. Titan Black, if it's a real thing, will have no real advantage over the 780 Ti in just gaming.
Right.
So I would think that a smart, intelligent PC enthusiast would just buy the 780 Ti instead of the Titan. But who might buy the Titan is like schools or businesses that don't want to invest heavily in GPU compute. But they want to test the waters and play around with stuff. I don't know. It's kind of an odd place, right? And
it's not kind of an odd place.
Still sure you'll see that you'll still find Titan Blacks in like high-end Origin PCs or main gear PCs or something like that. For those people that don't really care about money, they just want whatever is the best.
AMD A8 7600 Kaveri APU and R7 250 dual graphics testing. Pacing is fixed, aka hybrid crossfire that actually works. What's going on with this demo, Ryan? This is an interesting one.
So, hybrid crossfire and dual graphics, if you're not familiar with it, is the combination of a processor with integrated graphics paired with a discrete GPU, and that they work together to improve performance over either individually. Right? It's an interesting idea. You take an AMD APU that has pretty good integrated graphics in it. You add in a $60, $70, $80 video card, and they work together and they scale performance. It's a feature that's been around for a while. The problem was that just like all the other frame pacing, stuttering issues that were in place with AMD Crossfire with two discrete cards, it was also a problem here, right? And so the actual performance experience that you got running dual graphics was usually lower than the performance of the lowest performing individual GPU, whether that be the integrated or the discrete card. And that's awful, right? Like that's no good. And it didn't get a whole lot of coverage because it's not a high end, it's not a sexy story, right? It's not a big deal there. But as it turns out, the same 14.1 driver that's going to come out and add Mantle support eventually for AMD cards will also bring about some frame pacing fixes for HD 7000 series users. Will be able to do Crossfire and Eyefinity, and that will work now, right? That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Hurrah. But it also fixes dual graphics. So we did some testing on that with a Kaveri A8 7600 and the R7 250. And we showed, Battlefield 3, Bioshock Grid, Skyrim, Battlefield 4 with frame pacing enabled and frame pacing disabled. And we actually saw pretty good results, right? So if you look at the orange lines represent what you used to have when you were running dual graphics. And you see it's actually lower performing than even just the APU by itself, whereas the black line there is the combination of both with the new driver and new technology at work. So you get better frame rates, it's smoother. It's an overall just totally improved, better experience, right? And it actually makes dual graphics kind of a useful thing now. So you can buy a Kaveri APU, run games at 1080p for a little while. Maybe Titanfall comes out in March, and you don't have enough GPU horsepower for that, so you can buy a $70 video card, and you're not just getting the performance of the $70 video card. The APU that you have already invested in is helping some, right? We're not talking 80 or 90%. We're talking more in the 20 to 35% performance scaling. But it's better than nothing, and it's pretty good. And it's way better than it was before. So now the technology actually works, and we'll see how it scales. This was with the A8 7600, which is kind of the lower end of the APU lineup. that AMD just launched. So we got a 7850K, and that we're going to do some more testing on for dual graphics soon as well. So
cool.
Yeah.
From the affordable end of the gaming market, you've got a pretty cool video perspective. 2013 games on the A10 7850K versus Intel Core i3 and GeForce GT 630. This is interesting, actually. What would be the pricing of the two systems you compared in this video?
Obviously, it depends on what other stuff you're adding to it. The APU itself is like 170, and then the Core i3 and GT 630 is about $200. So the processor is cheaper, but when you add in the discrete card, I think that was like $70. So you get you're paying $30 less for the A10 7850K system as a whole, right? If you use the same processor and you use a similarly spec'd motherboard, and you're getting similarly priced memory, and the things that should all be the same when you're doing tests should all be the same. You could build a system on a 7850K for probably $500 and still get like 120 gig SSD in there or something like that, right?
I mean,
so
we're talking about a $65 video card with 96 CUDA cores from EVGA.
Yep.
Super inexpensive. What's the power consumption like on a card like that?
Oh God, 30 watts, maybe.
So super low power.
Yeah. But it will be more, the combination of the Intel processor and the GPU is probably going to be more than just the APU on its own.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. And then you have one less fan in your system as well. Right. So it should be quieter. Right. Because a lot of times the fans on these small video cards, these low cost video cards, are lower quality. So they're just loud, whiny things that sit on there, right? So not always, but a lot of times that tends to be the stereotype of these low cost GPUs. But you can see that we just kind of did some real quick testing. Let's compare this on five different games, and you get scaling in the 20 to 40, 50% range depending on the game, right? So APUs have advantages. It's not a perfect solution. It's not for everybody. Right, but if you're doing 1080p mainstream stuff, it's a pretty good option.
And you're budget conscious. I mean, if you don't want to spend all the money to build a serious gaming PC, you know what? You can add a nice GPU later on. Cool.
Yeah, you can always do that. Yeah.
AMD's first SIST ARM on a chip, Opteron, will be here soon. Quote, says Jeremy Hillstrom, the Opteron A1100 will be the name born by AMD's first system on a chip, which we knew previously as Seattle. The first chip will contain ARM Cortex A57 architecture working in tandem with AMD's. A full 64-bit chip, up to 4 megabytes of shared L2 cache, 8 megas shared L3 cache, or shelled as I like to call it. Will support up to 4 DIMMs of either DDR3 or DDR4 and dual channel with ECC. Obviously, a server architecture. It will boot using UEFI into a Linux environment based on Fedora and will be optimized to handle web front ends and data center tasks. So, is this kind of AMD's version of NVIDIA's trying to find a place that is not just their core market of GPUs and in obviously in AMD's case now APUs, formerly CPUs?
Right. Yeah, I think so. It's essentially AMD saying that the hot thing is ARM servers, and hey, we know a lot more about the server and enterprise ecosystem than a lot of these companies that are trying to enter into it. And I think is it Calzada? Is that the name of the company that that was making an ARM enterprise play? They actually went out of business recently.
Right.
So there's less competition in it with AMD now. So it'll be interesting to see. It's also, this is AMD's first ARM CPU design, right? So they had previously implemented like an ARM core onto an Opteron processor as a security feature, like as to use some of their security trust zone, I think is what it's called, technology. But this is an A57 base part, so 64-bit ARM. It's one of the first ones of those out there. And I think based on discussions we had yesterday, this is something that's sampling in the next month or so. So it'll be interesting to see. But I mean, you're talking about an ARM processor that will support DDR3 or DDR4 memory with dual channel ECC. up to 8 SATA ports, 8 lanes of PCI 3.0. That's a lot of connectivity for an ARM part. I'll be curious to see how that performs, right? It's obviously not something that you're going to put into your desktop.
But it make a killer FreeNAS box.
Yeah. I mean, you never know what they could do with that. Obviously, their first play is to like, hey, Facebook and Google and those guys, they're probably all making their own, but similar sized enterprise players is where they're going after here. So
it's all about saving power at the giant data center. IBM sold its x86 servant market to Lenovo. Certainly not I expected, but essentially IBM sold pretty much, its consumer-facing hardware market and its desktops, its laptops, I guess would be an enterprise market also if you're thinking about Mr. Shrout's beloved ThinkPads. I love them too. $2.3 billion. Lenovo's going to take over or purchase the x86 torch away from IBM. This is interesting.
It's so like Lenovo is buying everything. We didn't have a story in here, but they're buying Motorola off Google as well. I don't know. Like
they have a plan.
Trying to think of what are they doing with all of this stuff, right? They've got the Lenovo consumer brand of laptops and all-in-ones and desktops still. Add in IBM's x86 server market. Add in Motorola's portable devices. It's kind of weird. I don't know. I honestly, if somebody had told me that IBM didn't make x86 servers anymore, I would have been like, yeah, that sounds right. So to me, it's not as
You're sitting there, wait, didn't they sell that with the rest of the business in 2005?
Yeah, I honestly would have believed that if somebody had said that was the case, I'd been like, yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. So IBM, as it used to be, is less and less the entity that it once was, right? And this is just another portion of it falling off, going somewhere else.
In some ways, they're more and more the sort of like if you need to create a banking system that spans multiple continents. You know what I mean? They're just they're less. They care a lot less about hardware.
Yeah, I knew they were turning into a services company, so the fact that they still had x86 servers was, I guess, a surprise to me, but that's all right.
Gigabyte Brick says AMD discrete graphics. It's kind of an interesting thought, right? The Intel NUC, the Gigabyte Bricks boxes, these really cool, very small, self-contained computers, which mostly have had, suckage where the gaming performance should be. This one, Scott points out, is identical to the main gear Sparks because they're both powered by an AMD A8 5557M APU with an AMD Radeon R9 M275X mobile discrete GPU. And oddly enough, quote, they use the same case with the same color scheme. Just a different logo on the box, which is really, really funny. What's the pricing on this going to be? Do we know yet?
I don't have that yet. The main gear Spark might give you an idea of what it was going to be priced at. I agree with you though. Like I was just interested in the idea of this super small form factor with a discrete GPU. I mean, it's the R9 M275X is like the performance of a 250, I think, or a 260. So it's not a super high end GPU, but it's definitely going to be better performing than the processors that you find in NUCs today and other of the Gigabyte Brick systems. I think the APU, there's actually the processor in this is actually it's actually a Trinity-based APU, the A8 5557M, which is a little bit older system than I kind of expected to see in there, or a little bit older APU that I expected to see in there. But maybe they're getting it at a deep discount, and if low power is their goal, then that's fine too. Yeah, it looks like the main gear Spark was the Steam Machine variant that the company launched,
which of course is not listed on the.
It is not, and it does. The news post I found on Engadget says the Spark's final price point is up in the air, but the company promises it will be an affordable PC solution.
I hate the word solution in an answer.
Yeah.
I like the Engadget line. Maiden Gear Spark is a tiny steam machine with laptop internals, which is a pretty accurate description. Curious where all those AMD R9 graphics cards are going. Ryan, show us the scary box full of oh my goodness, R290Xs. That thing's just, yeah.
It's impressive looking, actually.
I want the back plane that's on that.
So, yeah, it looks like just like standard shelving that I would buy at Sam's Club or Costco. That they added a
Home
metal
Depot.
bar to. Yeah, they added a metal bar to. And then if you look at that first picture again, all of the there's a zip tie through the heatsink shroud that actually attaches it to like hold up the back half of the card. It's actually pretty interesting. But if you look at like the wiring is really good. If that second picture, so what we're looking at here is a Dogecoin mining rig that somebody built and posted on Reddit. That second picture there is impressive. I had never seen anything like this before.
No.
I didn't know it existed.
That's an expensive piece of hardware.
It's PCI Express to USB 3, and then if you look at the one, the next picture below it or whatever, like then at the graphics card, the USB 3 connection goes back into PCI Express, and it actually the little adapter there has a Molex power connection, so that it's sending power through the PCI Express bus. As well, like as the graphics card would expect to see. So if you didn't have that, either the card wouldn't work or you might have stability issues or something.
Right.
And it's all laid out really well. And I think if you click through, there's a link at the bottom there that says you can see the rest of the photos. It's just an imager collection, and it has some more photos of kind of how everything is organized and laid out. It's all powered by a single 1500 watt power supply, I think.
I will say I was confused that I thought that the board, funny, from the angle on the first shot, it looks like all of the cards were plugged into a giant backplane and not an actual standard PC motherboard. But
yep, it's all going into an ASRock Intel board. That motherboard has a serial port and a parallel port on it, by the way.
That's pretty awesome.
If you look at the back panel of that, it has two PS2 ports, serial, parallel, and VGA. I feel like it's like 2002 again.
Or hey, I will say they still sell a lot of those for the server market.
I think
enterprise. I mean, I was laughing because I had we were building our SteamOS box, and of course, in the middle of that, my Core i5 system, the motherboard ate itself and died. So it was on my 920 box, my gaming box, and of course, in 1155, there was like literally one 1155 motherboard for sale in San Francisco for under $200, and the rest of them were these insane, incredibly arcane like server or enterprise architecture boxes with VGA and like is that. No, I'm looking at ports I haven't seen on a mainstream PC in like 6 years on the back of these motherboards going, no. But they're out there.
So it's an interesting discussion topic, right? So this system is on here to demonstrate what the cryptocurrency mining community builds, right? So this person has a low-end processor. They're not worried about the platform or anything like that. And then they found a board that had 6 PCI Express slots, and they have now connected 6 R9 270 MSI Gaming Series graphics cards to this PC. Not for gaming purposes. They're not all running in Crossfire X. They're all doing coin mining of some kind. I think that was Dogecoin is what the guy said he was building it for. And so, there were still some people that debated whether or not the coin mining scenarios that are going on were actually causing shortages of GPUs, or if it was just great sales of these cards for gaming purposes and AMD couldn't keep up.
Right.
Clearly, a lot of people are building these types of systems, right? If you go to the Litecoin mining subreddit, like there's just people are building these systems now. If you go to Tiger Director Newegg, they now have like mining system builds or mining combos. Like I think we saw one yesterday. What did it have, Ken? It had like 6 R9 290Xs or something in it.
Right.
Which they didn't even sell the USB to PCI Express like adapters you would need to even get that to work. But I'm thinking like 6 R9 290X cards. That's $3,600 to $4,000 worth of graphics cards right, at their current price.
That's why they're not doing Bitcoin. They're doing some of the new virtual currencies.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I mean, like Bitcoin is not. Bitcoin itself is not really good for GPU mining is not really good for that anymore. That's right. Kind of specific ASICs that do that now. But if you get in early on Dogecoin or Litecoin or
Bob's Coin or Virtual Coin or Ryan Coin or Patrick Coin or
absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's amazing to me how this has sprung up and how so many people have kind of adopted it. And we AMD, what do they think about it? They're selling graphics cards, so that's great for them, I guess. But they're not making any more money per sale than they would if they were going to gamers.
The retailers, however, are really enjoying being able to overcharge for the scarce and unavailable 290 and 270.
I get knocked for this opinion because people accuse me of being anti-AMD sometimes, but I think AMD would rather sell these cards to gamers.
Yes, because gamers will still be buying cards in 2 or 3 years, and that probably at that point the Bitcoin mining mayhem will have burned itself out and stabilized at sort of like crazy enterprise level giant cloud computing situations. And I'm sure somebody's running some sort of crazy Amazon services for Bitcoin right now.
I don't know. Yeah, that would be interesting to do, because I would say that you want people in your ecosystem so that the next time they go upgrade their system, they go, hey, I had a really good experience with that card, or that software worked great, or Mantle was awesome, so I'm going to buy another AMD card. People that can't afford to buy the AMD card that they want because of coin mining, if they go to an NVIDIA solution, now they're learning about GeForce Experience and G-Sync and that kind of stuff. And it's good for AMD in the short term, I think, because they're selling out stuff and they're getting a great reputation in that area. But I think it may be bad in the long run for kind of maintaining a good user base, like a loyal user base.
We shall find out. Twitch, TWICH at twit.tv is the email address. We love your questions. Our first one comes from Tommy. He's got a question about the Dream System. He emailed in, I'm building my first PC. My main use is Photoshop and video editing, along with my advanced music collection. I like the Dream System, but I'm looking to the future of Haswell Thunderbolt, at least 32 gigs of Ripjaws, GTX 790 Pardon me while I try to not chew on my own braces. A GTX 780 Ti for dual monitors. 4K is a future option. 1200 watt power supply. The best stereo options. I have Sennheiser headphones and need an amp and a cooling system because I'll be moving to Hawaii and won't have air conditioning. Overclocking may be a future option. Is there anything I could combine between the Dream End and high-end systems to meet my needs? I swear I answered this question last week.
Did you?
I did.
Okay. All right. No, I believe you.
I was just giggling about. I was sitting there. I was like, "This looks familiar," and I'm like, "Hawaii, yes, Hawaii's not going to be a problem." Well, it could be, but that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah. All right. Did we get the next one then too? Because now I'm concerned that I copy and pasted the wrong emails from the thread. I don't remember talking about the Intel Arc stuff, so
it's a possibility that Tommy may have emailed that to TechZilla, so that may have been where I got a little confused on that one. But we got a good one from Jack. Okay. He's looking for some info on CPUs. Just FYI, on one of the shows, Patrick was puzzled by an Atom server. Yes, I was. So was I. I found an Intel webpage that gives a brief fact sheet on CPUs. There's a nice menu on the left. This is the Intel's Arc site, arc.intel.com/search/advanced/?S equals T, which I'm sure sounded great if you're listening to the podcast on an MP3 right now. There's a nice menu on the left. For family, try Atom processor. For server, then click search. Have fun. Man, I got to warn you, if you've never, sort of just lost yourself inside of Intel's Arc, if you like to geek out on specs, you could lose days. Because they've, Intel Quark system on a chip. I mean, literally like i7 Extreme, i7, i5, i3, i7, i7. It's like 4th gen, 3rd gen, 2nd gen, previous iterations. The Atom processors, Atom processor for smartphone and tablet, Atom processor for communications, Atom processor for service, Atom processor for storage. Intel Pentium processor, because, hey, technically they're still selling those. Legacy processors, Xeons, Titaniums. Dude, I had completely forgotten about this. Jack, thank you so much. Jack, on behalf of my children and wife, how dare you?
You know what? I use that all the time, right? So we're like, okay, what processor should we compare to this? Or you know, I'm looking on Newegg or I'm looking on Amazon at prices of processors. Like, what are the actual specification differences? You can go there, you can set up comparisons. It really disappoints me that AMD does not have a similar feature for their parts, right? Because they have a huge lineup, right? We could go through the FX series, all the different APUs, all the Opterons. The Opterons get very confusing in the enterprise world. I would love to see that. You know, NVIDIA kind of has that on their GeForce side. They list specifications, but they're kind of hit or miss on what specifications they list. And then AMD, again, does not have it on the GPU side either. So some great information there. And as you're saying is correct. Like, you can kind of just go look around arc.intel.com. And if you're into processors and nerdy tech stuff, compare with, it's kind of interesting to see, well, here's all the 4000 series Haswell parts. Now you can learn why what code means it's a 35-watt part versus a 65-watt part versus an 80-watt part or whatever it is. And you can kind of translate all that stuff. So, well,
it's funny. I mean, you're looking at like those the Atom for server processors, right? They're interesting. I mean, they're 6-watt, 9-watt, 14-watt parts, which is really the sweet spot. The big deal with data centers or server farms or whatever you want to call them, cloud computing locations. You know, everybody who's building these are trying to figure out, you know, how close they can build them to some sort of hydroelectric power source or an inexpensive electric source. And in order to stuff more processing power into a building that has a finite cooling capacity, they want to figure out how to reduce the amount of wattage or the amount of heat, the TDP of the CPU. And it's kind of, you can kind of, it's an interesting idea, right? You've got a little tiny Intel Atom processor running like 1.7 or turboing itself up to 2 or 2.2 gigahertz with, like, you know, dual gigabyte port support or some high-end SATA support, the ability to support 16 gigabytes of memory. You know, one of the more high-end parts, like the C270 2730. So 8 cores, 8 threads, 1.7 gigahertz, 2 on max turbo, 4 megabytes of cache, 64-bit instruction set. Max TDP is 12 watts. It'll handle 64 gigabytes of memory, depending on what kind of memory you're using into it. It's pretty awesome, you know. Max memory bandwidth, 25.6 gigabits per second. Wow. Yeah. These are really interesting parts. Totally not something I would use at home unless, you know, for some reason I was going to run FreeNAS or a server operating system on it. But I'm sure there's a good possibility that I will have my hands on boxes this year that have these parts inside of them. I don't know. Speaking of memory.
Neat stuff.
McButterpants in the chat room. Ryan, after exceeds 32 gigabytes of RAM, will RAM be of no concern? Oh boy. The battle between code and hardware. I mean, remember when 8 gigabytes was all the RAM in the world?
Yes.
Remember when 4 gigabytes of RAM was all the RAM in the world?
Yes.
Remember when 1 gigabyte of RAM was hundreds of dollars and all the RAM you would ever use in the world?
Yep. Yeah,
and
so
yet,
I think you just answered his question.
Dudes Freed says, how does Mantle affect frame rating?
That's interesting because yeah. So frame rating, which is our graphics testing methodology we use at PC Per, that we actually capture the output coming out of the video card and then analyze it post-process to get better data than you could with software running locally. It does get affected by Mantle, but really only because the software, like when we do our frame rating, it requires you run the game and you run a piece of software in the background that actually puts a colored overlay over the frames on the left-hand side. And we use those colored overlays to analyze the frames after the fact. The problem with Mantle is that all of the software, whether it be Fraps or the NVIDIA-based overlay, or who makes the other one? One of the GPU monitoring software includes an overlay application on it too. Those are all based on DirectX. So they use DirectX hooks to apply the overlay to the game inside the game engine. Well, since Mantle version of Battlefield 4 is not using DirectX, we have no way to hook onto it and use it. So we're still working on some things to make that happen. So like for Battlefield 4, we're having to test in a little bit different way for our first Mantle article, but we hope to be able to get back into the frame capture capability probably within a month or so with Mantle. I mean, the good news is Mantle is going to be very limited release. It's not affecting frame rating and how we test graphics cards going forward. It's just kind of, there's going to be these one-off kind of stories that we do on Mantle performance and how it compares to D3D performance, and it will affect frame rating for a little while then too. So we'll get it figured out though.
Bruce S., Ryan Trout, have you received either the MSI Bay Trail motherboard J1800i or Intel NUC with Bay Trail? Any testing yet?
No on either. I have not received either of those. I did get a Haswell NUC in that I haven't actually finished testing yet. And that I'm interested to kind of see how it performs. The Bay Trail one is maybe more interesting because hopefully it will be lower cost. It's thinner. I mean, it's hard to get much smaller than the NUC as it already is. But I haven't had that MSI, the motherboard that we saw for the first time at CES. I haven't actually gotten that in either. I think that would be a good potential for a home NAS or like a PC-based router or firewall, like that type of thing. It would be interesting to see what we can get out of those systems. But no, nothing in yet.
Y Guy says, difference between WD red and green. Quote, we left him hanging on know-how today. I apologize for that. TLR, time-limited error recovery, is the big thing that sets apart red drives from green drives. There's some interesting stuff going on with the warranty on red drives and stuff like that, but the primary thing is time-limited error recovery. Essentially, the hard drive says, whoa, I haven't completed an I/O request. Stop. I am part of a RAID. I am always part of a RAID. And the green drives kind of go, huh? And there's a timeout on the RAID controller or the RAID software inside of your system. Basically, man, it's Alan could probably explain this in like 12 words or less. So I apologize to Alan if he's listening right now. But essentially, the RAID encounters a bad sector. It goes to check its parity data. Things are going on in I/O, and a red drive is smart enough to say, I'm not done yet. And a green drive will go, huh? And in the process of the green drive going, huh, you can lose large amounts of your data on the drive. That is a abusive, terrible, awful, weak oversimplification. But basically, check out Alan's reviews on PC Per of the Red Series drives. He has an elegant, sophisticated, step-by-step, basically education for you on Y Guy and what happens when things go particularly haywire on a RAID configuration without TLR support, or RAID drives, or drives in a RAID that don't have time-limited error recovery. That said, Alan, like myself, and thousands and millions of other people, or at least thousands, are running green drives on RAIDs that haven't killed, unless, of course, Alan has upgraded all of his greens to reds. But that can take a while because, reds, 3 terabyte green drives used to cost a lot of money, and I'm just not quite ready to replace them all with reds yet. But as I move forward, those 4 terabyte red drives are looking really, really sweet. Oh, my goodness. Toilet Bug, and there was someone who just asked a question about an inexpensive 3D card for rendering. And I'm going to say one of the issues with rendering is it varies so much with the application you're running, the support across the different, AMD versus NVIDIA, that we kind of need to know what app you're running and what kind of rendering you're doing, because it's also really frustrating because you'll have something like this Photoshop filter is accelerated, but this one isn't, or that does, or this doesn't. So if you're looking for information on how to accelerate a specific app, or if a specific app is accelerated by a 3D card, a GPU, definitely send us more details on that to Twitch, TWICH at twit.tv. And always remember that the more money you up to a certain point, I'm going to make Ryan pull Ryan up. This is going to be a good face. Up to a certain point, the more money you spend on a GPU, the faster it will accelerate something. In terms of physical work process, if you're doing, actual real work like rendering or processing during a game, it's like that's the pained, thoughtful expression there.
Yes, but you're right about the application-specific nature of rendering, and in particular, like software support. So you're looking at like Fire Pro versus Quadro,
right.
Perhaps. There's AMD has made great strides in Fire Pro in terms of performance. NVIDIA still dominates the market because of software support and that kind of thing. So it definitely depends on what he's doing and for what end.
Yeah. Sorry we couldn't get more specific than that, but it's a tough one. And I do like what Dudes Fried said in the chat room. Quote, "It accelerates the emptying of my wallet for one thing, because as Bruce S. points out, there is a correlation between price and power." And I think it's Audio Murphy says bank account depletion.
That will happen.
What's coming up on PC Per this week? Outside of the wait for the 14.1 Catalyst drivers.
That's pretty much it for me right now. So we have that we're working on, and we're going to try to figure out several different hardware and software several different GPU and CPU combinations to test on that. We have that Haswell Nook that we are working on. We also have I got my first retail custom cooled R9 290 card in from XFX. So not a 290X, but a 290. And then we have a water cooler adapter from the Kraken G10, I think it is, that we have a video of and I have testing of, and I had just not had time yet to actually publish a story on that we'll have up this week as well. So you can see how much cooler and quieter an R9 290 or 290X can run with a different cooler installed on it.
If you gave up sleep, you could write more stories, Ryan.
Yep. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm giving up sleep, but it's mostly in relation to the dogs.
Are the dogs? Can we cut to the dogs real quick? Do we have another shot from the dog cam? The adorable. Oh yeah, liquid puppy people.
Yeah. I'm more impressed that he just had that ready on the fly. That's actually pretty impressive. It's pretty good. No waiting. Tabs are closed during the production of This Week in Computer Hardware. I take
puppies very seriously. Okay, I'm ready with the puppies anytime.
Yeah. So brand new puppies get me up 3 or 4 times a night. So I am losing sleep. My mother laughs because she says that they're training me for when I have children. And I say, well, this is doing the exact opposite of what my mother would like, which is wanting me to have children sooner rather than later.
Don't worry. Neither the dogs nor your mother are going to reveal to you the deep, dark, evil secrets of parenthood, because I'm sure your mother and the dogs want you to have children.
Yeah.
We did a gaming PC build. Did some interesting stuff for Nick at Rev3 Games, one of the people we work with. He had 200 Steam games and no gaming box. We built him we built him a $800 gaming PC, and did some interesting stuff Nick did with finding a really good balance of PC parts. It's going to be on DieTryan, DIYTRYN.com or youtube.com/DieTryan. And Shannon, you may know from here at the Twit Cottage, is going to be joining me on Techzilla starting Monday. So that's going to be exciting. She's going to be talking about how to lock down your life online in honor of the horrendous social engineering and hacking that PayPal enabled, that ended up with a very nice internet human person losing their $50,000 Twitter account.
Oh, yeah, I read about that.
Twitter account. So the less information PayPal has for me, the happier I'm going to be. But that should be a fun episode of Techzilla.
Cool.
Oh, my goodness. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. Chat room, I love you. Even if I'm glancing up and missing things as they scroll by at high speed. I'll have it on my monitor next week. And hey, that's it for this episode of Twitch. My name is Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Schrout.
We'll see you next week.